Hey everyone, welcome back to my shop. So the last 4 or 5 years, I have been donating items I've made to the Humane Educational Society's silent auction that they have every year as a fundraiser. Last year, I did a dog bed, or a couple of dog beds, and I partnered up with Chattanooga Whiskey and an alcohol distributorship called Athens Distributing, and they donated some alcohol, and between the two, we raised over $1,300, so that's pretty good. This year, I'd like to do the same, although I'm going to do one of these dog beds, the shorter ones, and I also want to make one of the larger dog beds. I haven't made one before, so I'm splitting the barrel the other direction, lengthwise, and I want to make a dog barrel for a larger dog. If you want to see how to make these smaller ones, I did a video on making these last year, so you can look back in my video collection. To make the longer dog beds, it's quite similar to making these. To sum up, I start off by knocking off the rings. Once the rings are off, I drill them on my hipster drill press. Before I knock the rings off, I mark the center of each stave with a lumber crayon, and that way I know where to drill. One hole for each stave. With the rings off, it's easier to sand the barrel, so I work through the grits from 60 all the way up to 220. I do the very top and bottom, and I also leave the top and the bottom rings in place because that's what really holds the barrel together, so I don't want to remove those. I will clean up those two rings with a wire wheel, and I will drill them separately. Once I have the barrel sanded, the rings drilled and cleaned up, I will knock them back into place and use some black oxide screws to hold them in place. I will then knock off the bottom rings, and at this point, I put down an old moving blanket to protect the black oxide on the screws, and the process starts all over again. That brings us up to date on where we are now. I've got all the rings on, everything sanded. I have to decide on where I'm going to cut it apart, and I think this would be a good spot here. There's a wide piece here and a very narrow piece here, and directly 180 from that, it's the same thing. I have a wide piece and a narrow piece. So I'm going to reinforce the rings there and also the top and bottom rings on both sides and cut it apart. I somehow thought it would be more dramatic when I cut the last strap, but there we go. Whew. That is a strong smell of whiskey. Alrighty. It stopped raining outside, so I can move these pieces outside, scrape the char off of them, clean them up, and start thinking about legs. Don't eat that. I want to give the dog bed a bit more shape, so I'm going to cut the rings off at this wide stave and just bring it down to like a 45 and have like an opening to the bed. I've glued the end piece back together that fell apart. Where are my ratchet straps? I have the ends in place, some ratchet straps. I just need to mark and cut the barrel ends on both sides, and I will glue them in place. Same thing on the other side. Now that the end pieces are glued into place, I'm going to put these other pieces on top for reinforcement. I really don't trust the glue joint that's holding the shape of the barrel, so I'm just going to use these to reinforce it. I started out a little bit wider, but I wanted to make them as narrow as possible because they're really not part of the whiskey barrel. So just a couple of screws at each end to hold it in place, and I'm going to do that at both ends. So now that the top is done, I need to figure out legs. I started out with a square piece of wood here, and I was going to dish it out and put it underneath a couple of them, but I just didn't like the way that looks. And I really want a lot of surface area because I don't want it to rock. I have it orientated in the way I want, and what I ended up going with was I made a template to do individual legs, and they're basically going to go like that. So I made 4 of them. They fit on pretty nicely. It's a bit of a compound angle though, about a 5-degree bevel has to go on each leg. So I have to custom fit each one. I may revisit this on the second bed. Of course, there are 2 halves to this barrel, so I may do something with this on the other barrel. Well, this dog's complete. This dog bed's complete. I still have one more to do. Not sure how I'll do the legs on that one. But now I'm going to flip it over, stain it, and finish it. There you go. I've got both dog beds done, stained with a couple coats of poly on them. The one with the legs that was kind of the focus of the video, it looks nice. I think the legs make it look like a piece of furniture, whereas the other legs that I went with on the other dog bed, I think they're kind of more industrial and kind of maybe what you would see a whiskey barrel resting on. If you have a favorite, let me know in the comments. As I mentioned before, one of these dog beds is going to go to a silent auction benefiting the Humane Educational Society here in Chattanooga. It's going to be one of these larger dog beds and one of the smaller dog beds. And again, this year I teamed up with Athens Distributing, which is an alcohol distributor here, and also Chattanooga Whiskey. Hopefully this year we will raise a bit more money than we did last year. I will let you know when the time comes, which I think is the end of June, how we did. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.